I don't know if I can change your mind, because here's the thing. When I see the sign that says the left is violent, and you talked about how it's not proportional, and I would love to see your statistics about that.
Sure.
Because
What do you mean your statistic?
we could make the same statement about the right very easily.
What about your statistic? Okay, buddy.
Right, like we could say that was it just a month or two ago that the Democratic lawmakers were shot, and that was like
The Democratic lawmakers were shot by a lefty. Why are we doing this game every single time?
That's not true. That is like unironically not true. Okay? The Democratic lawmakers were shot by a lefty. Not correct. There is more evidence to suggest that the guy was right-leaning in nature. There's no evidence that the guy was a lefty. There's no evidence that the guy was like a diehard Republican either. There's just like legitimately no verifiable information that he was against anti-immigration policies because it would cut into his bottom line of hiring immigrants for one of the businesses that he was working for. But him being a lefty doesn't seem the case. The guy seemed to be like a pretty staunch capitalist, conservative individual that heavily relied on like immigrant labor for his company. By the way, it's crazy how like immediately, like as I was saying earlier, as I was trying to communicate earlier, it's crazy like how immediate or how fast, how quick these people want to jump to conclusions and claim something as fact. It's like nobody understands nuance anymore. Nobody wants to understand nuance anymore. Nobody wants to understand that perhaps some of these things were done in a very specific way to obscure motivation, to cause more dissent, to perhaps confuse people. Because while the guy did have writings in his car, allegedly, right? Could have been planted. Could have not been planted. Could have been legitimately his. But no kings flyers. And it was just like a bunch of papers with like, no kings written down on Sharpie in the most lazy way imaginable. Does that really sound like somebody who's dedicated to the cause? Does that really sound that like somebody who's dedicated to like the, anti-Trump agenda? Or does that sound like somebody who like scribbled something a couple of weeks in advance to try to create as much, discourse as possible to mask his trail? Yeah, this guy targeted only Dems, but who knows what he thought. To say that a guy who targeted only Dems is a lefty, is a Democrat himself, is kind of absurd. It's really weird to think about. A U.S. senator falsely claimed Minnesota shooting suspect was Marxist. With the available evidence, including public comments from people who knew Bolter, news report about Bolter's writing and video Bolter did not support the conclusion this was the work of a left-leaning ideologue. His friend said he was a right-leaning, a supporter of President Donald Trump, and opposed abortion rights, while preaching in the Democrat Republic in the Congo a few years ago. This is true. This is true. This is true. There's video evidence of him preaching, and in the Congo. He specifically also wanted people. He had like an ideology where hiring people from like the Congo or some regions of Africa would be beneficial to help an oil business that he was working for, because he was like a consultant for some oil business or some oil company. This guy is a super religious individual that went preaching out to the Congo. That works for an oil company. He is against abortion rights. He is against like abortion in general. That is true. I'm not sure if he's a supporter of Donald Trump. I'm not sure how true that is, because I haven't read that in other articles or in other sources. Notice how Nux won't debate against anyone. It's because he knows that everything that he's talking about is purely like consumed on X. This guy has never done any legitimate research for himself. All he does is go on Twitter, read what other people are saying, because he believes them to be well-informed, even though a lot of the times people on Twitter are lying. He won't debate anybody. Neither will Asmongold, because they know that they don't have any legitimate information to substantiate their claims.
Were shot by a Tim Walz appointee who literally wrote in the manifesto it's not because of Trump.
All right, I think our bigger problem is that the
talk about the Hortmans in Minnesota, right?
And also, I don't think that somebody going out and murdering somebody is necessarily indicative of political extremism. I don't think that somebody has to be like extremely far right or extremely far left to go out of their way to murder somebody. Some people are genuinely just fucking lunatics.
And on some issues, Democrat. And he was appointed by a Tim Walz administration.
For the record, that was right after Melissa Hortman voted against the Democratic Party.
So that was not done in the name of political violence. He said Tim Walz ordered him to assassinate somebody who was out of his mind. But I'd like you to continue with
Okay, fair enough.
the example.
Sure. And let's say, okay, so he wasn't right. That's fine.
No, it wasn't political violence.
It wasn't political. Oh, it didn't count as political violence.
Based on the definition you agreed to, right?
Yeah. And I think a lot of it too is there's so many things happening. It's actually really hard to get all the facts about everything.
Sure.
And our media is when they make.
I just realized something. In this, like, you know, in this argument between both of these individuals, Nux Taku's, like, you know, own agenda, his own narrative, like, just immediately gets fucking blasted to the water. If this is the type of individual to believe everything at face value, reads every tweet and just takes it at face value because that's all he knows how to do, because he's not intelligent at all, then why not take somebody he respects, Steven Crowder, picking up the torch, picking up the, you know, blood-soaked mic, as he said, at face value, and says that, you know, by the definition that was established here and by the information that was provided, this is not political. Why is he going to immediately presume that this was done purely, like, you know, out of left violence?
So it's pretty hard to categorize it as political violence when the targets were largely conservative and the man who carried out the action seems like he might be Republican. But I think we could pick a more clear...
Okay. The man who carried out the action seems like he might be Republican. So Crowder, presumably, is more well-read on this stuff than I am, considering he is a political pundit that has, like, you know, specific motivations. He's even agreeing that the guy who carried out these attacks is seemingly a Republican. He's not saying was a lefty. He's not saying was a Republican. Seemingly. More of the information suggests that the guy was a Republican. Right? All of the information suggests. All of the coincidental and circumstantial evidence suggests that the guy was a Republican. He was a diehard Christian, preached in the Congo with very, very diehard, like, you know, I want to say Christian ideals based on what we saw off of that live stream, because that was live streamed. You can find that on YouTube right now. It seems like he had a military background. It seemed like he was pro-cop, given the fact that he didn't want to, like, you know, go on an all out, you know, attack on the police officers. It just appears like the guy was just, you know, generally a Republican individual. Will I call him far right? Will I call him, like, you know, moderate? No. Crowder's saying that, but he's just outright saying that the guy was a lefty. I wonder how he's gonna fucking react to this.
Example, a multitude of them. The reason we're here, and I don't think you would argue that this is unnecessary, the assassination in cold blood is an act of terrorism of Charlie Kirk. Is that political violence?
Bro, there's no way. What are you thinking about?
You seem so confident.
Why? There's no reason for him to react like this. There is no reason why he should be, like, you know, like, there's no reason why he should be soy reacting to what Crowder just said right there. Crowder literally just countered his own narrative. You want to believe that Bolter was a lefty enacting lefty violence on other lefties because the left, you know, the left wing is insane and is filled with violence. He doesn't seem to believe that. In this argument, he doesn't seem like he can accept that that person was left, nor that this was a politically fueled, you know, violent attack. Definitionally, he doesn't believe either of those things. Why is he soy reacting?
Now, I believe that you're discussing this in good faith, and I would assume that you roundly condemn political violence of all stripes.
Of course.
So do I.
Right.
Just to be clear, I think we both are.
This is a college kid. This person votes, bro. What are we doing, man?
This person, who the... the irony here. Nux Taku. This girl is unironically more educated than Nux Taku. Him saying, like, him complaining that this person votes, all of her, like, coming to a rational discussion and not immediately, like, you know, spouting off misinformation the same way Nux Taku does. Him not even being American, presumably. Who is he to complain about this fucking person voting? Who is he to, like, say anything about a college-educated individual? Who is this moron? This lolly-obsessed, hentai-obsessed freak. Who is he to say anything about who gets to vote or not in our country?
What do we do?
This person is rationally having a discussion and coming to an agreement with somebody that he agrees with. This person votes. This person votes. Two people having an educated discussion. This person votes. Shut the fuck up.
Dude, what are we doing, guys? This person votes. This person literally votes. Oh my god.
That's why we're...
I'm glad that Nux Taku cannot offer any meaningful input in our elections. I am so glad. I am so glad that Nux Taku can't fucking do shit for our elections.
sitting at a table having a conversation.
We do not need people like this, ever. We do not need people like this poisoning how people perceive politics. We do not need people like this giving out their ideas, their justifications, their beliefs, their opinions, their political interests, because it's all fucking wrong.
Right.
Do you identify as more liberal or conservative?
I like to think I'm moderate because I hold some conservative views and some liberal views.
She does feel like a moderate individual. And I guarantee you, Nux Taku is about to, like, you know, soy rage right here because this is a liberal idiot. No. She's actually taking what Steven Crowder has to say seriously, taking his words meaningfully, and not making blanket statements where some people would, such as Nux Taku generalized Vance Bolter, the Minnesota shooter, and coming to agreement saying that, you know what, perhaps Vance Bolter wasn't politically motivated, but based on the limited information that we have and the way that you presented it, Steven Crowder, maybe Charlie Kirk's death was politically motivated. Now let's talk about whether leftists are more inclined to commit political violence. She doesn't have any good rebuttal. Steven Crowder is presumably informed on data that suggests that left-leaning individuals are more likely to commit political violence. She's not, disengaging with the conversation or attacking it, doing any sort of fucking fallacy. She's just, rolling with the information. What more do you want? What more? How do you expect this person to react? Realistically. How do you realistically expect a rational adult to react in a situation like this? She's not going to, outright, eat everything that he has to put down. She has to think about what he's saying. And then she has to come to her own conclusion like any rational individual would. And within her conclusion, she's, somewhat agreeing with him. What is there to get mad about here?
Okay.
And I wish we could have a little bit more moderation in our country.
Like sitting down and having discussions.
Exactly.
Okay.
Things like this.
Because we get killed for it anyway.
Right. Yeah.
And only the right. Only the right gets killed for this anyway. You're
Not true.
being the one that got through. The reason I stopped doing this for years is because every single time out was a violent attack. Sometimes it was a rock. Sometimes it was a milkshake. Could be concrete, acid, chocolate, vanilla. I don't know. Doxing, fire bombings, Molotov cocktails. Maya Angelou spoke at SMU only a few years before my first time here. Didn't need this kind of security. And you can see it if you observe your speakers here. And I'll tell you why that is. If you look at the polls post-assassination of Charlie Kirk, and you label yourself as a moderate.
I want to know what the data here is. I want to know what specific data he's talking about. Because is he you can also if you wanted to counter argue what Steven Crowder is saying here, while it might be true that political pundits, political icons are more likely to face violent attacks, that is true for just about any political talking head that is considered to be widely controversial. That could be true. It could be true for somebody like Hassan. It could be true for somebody like Charlie Kirk. It could be true for somebody like Steven Crowder. It could be true for somebody like Bernie Sanders. It could be true for literally any one of these individuals. But when it comes to your average person, which he's trying to placate to, he's trying to connect to, he's trying to resonate with, is your average conservative more likely to be attacked by a liberal? Is your average conservative more likely to be attacked or killed by a political extremist? I'm inclined to believe no, because they're not what these people would consider valid or appropriate targets to get their movement or ideas across. It would be a waste of time. You could argue that political people, that icons, are more likely to face violence. But in general, people who identify with one political party over the other, I highly doubt it.
If you look at the polls post-assassination of Charlie Kirk, and you label yourself as a moderate, those who
Everyone that labels themselves as a moderate is not a moderate.
identify as
Okay, buddy. All right.
liberal support political violence at a ratio of 6-1 to conservatives. The YouGov poll said, is political violence acceptable? 77% of conservatives.
All right, you also have to consider, in these polls, what is political violence? What is political violence in the eyes of these people? There's not data being being given out here. There's not any nuances being asked. There's not any questions or I want to say widespread data samples where it could be divided between basic political violence, as in no attacking people that are large political icons, or more, I want to say, necessary political violence but revolutions. If America became an incredibly dangerous place that quickly needed a change of leadership, that quickly needed a change in policy so that people stopped dying, so that people had their freedoms back, so that people weren't being incarcerated, right? If let's say, for example, in some alternate timeline, the United States legitimately became Nazi Germany, I feel like a revolution would be in order. Most people would be inclined to agree that a revolution would be in order to fight against such tyrannical, oppression. That is a form of political violence. Most people, if you were to give them that hypothetical, would probably argue, you know what? I am in support of political violence. So let's assume that the vast majority, and then I know I'm being like, a little bit too charitable. Let's assume that the vast majority of these left-leaning individuals that partook in this poll took this into consideration and said, you know what? Under extreme circumstances, I think political violence is acceptable, and voted yes. Understanding those nuances, I think that should be disclosed within that poll. Because I don't think a lot of them are probably agreeing with political violence in the sense of just killing random talking heads.
Said not at all. Only 38% of those on the left said not at all.
Yeah, Crowder could easily think of a scenario where political violence would be justified. Most people probably would.
Percent of those on the left said somewhat to completely acceptable. We see the same stats after the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. We see the same stats after the firebombings of the Tesla dealership. And we see the same stats on the opposite side, those on the right roundly condemning political.
This is too much of a generalized. Okay. Again, she's not going to be able to come up with a rebuttal because why would she? Right? She's like, face to face with an icon, right? With somebody who's like widely renowned as a political celebrity. She's probably going to have a little bit of anxiety. She's not looking at this in real time where she can pause and just like analyze what she's thinking about or like, slowly think through what she's like wants to say. She's not going to come up with a rebuttal, but he's doing this opportunistically, knowing that she won't be able to try to make a point. But the fact of the matter is that in most circumstances, I am inclined to believe that if you were to offer somebody a hypothetical situation saying like, well, what if this occurred? Would you be in support of political violence? And it wouldn't be an insane hypothetical, so you can't cop out by saying that has no basis in reality. There has been many countries with tyrannical rule. There has been 2 recent examples of, people overthrowing their government for the sake of their betterment of their generation. Is that not political violence? People not support, people like, the people's rights to control their own, country and make life better for themselves? Most people would probably be in support of that. So, yeah, most people being in support of that would probably be pro-political violence to some degree.
Violence. The lowest you'll find is 72. You usually find it in the high 80s. You will not find a number that breaks half on the left.
Okay, you mentioned Donald Trump. Can we...
Bro, are you not going to acknowledge what he just said? That statistic destroys your entire argument.
Jump.
Yeah, you know what? Good point, Benji. Very good point. Just to like, destroy his entire argument and Nux Taku's entire argument. The whole the whole reason we have the Second Amendment and why so many people pearl clutch about the Second Amendment so much, about how we need our guns to protect ourselves from tyrannical overrule, to protect ourselves from a militia, from the government's militia, to protect ourselves from a government that strips away our freedoms. The whole basis of that, the whole basis of 2A, is political violence. If you are a conservative that believes in your Second Amendment right, I'm sorry, but you are inherently pro-political violence if you believe in your Second Amendment right. Your Second Amendment right, it's not so that you can have guns so that you can go out and shoot and hunt, or so that you can go out to the range, or for self-defense exclusively. That comes as a byproduct. The reason why you have your Second Amendment right and why people support it is to protect yourselves from a tyrannical government.
Back. Can we jump to that for just a minute?
Also, for the record, all of these pollings, they all count Free Palestine riots as far right because, well, Islam is pretty far right in general,
Donald Trump, sure, I assumed we would.
Well, because I thought that guy was a registered Republican, and then he maybe
Which guy?
donated, the guy who attempted to assassinate Donald Trump. I'm sorry, I'm really terrible at names.
Crooks.
Yeah, that he was a registered Republican. So would you consider him a act of violence on the...
That's absolute... What are you talking about? Of course.
What the fuck do you mean, what are you talking about? That is a fair question to ask. She's measuring out his political consistency, or his, his logical consistency. Given the fact that there was, no legitimate understanding of that guy's motivation, although he was registered to be a conservative voter, a Republican voter, would he consider that, given the circumstances that he laid out, given the information that he laid out, or the, details that he laid out, would he consider that to be an act of political violence?
What are we doing? Come on, dude. Stop.
Nux Taku does not have a brain. Nux Taku does not have a brain.
It's unbelievable.
I would consider the attempted assassination
of the right-wing candidate for president as left-wing violence. Yeah.
A presidential nominee political violence, yes.
Yes.
I don't know if you know this, there are a lot of people on the right who don't like Donald Trump.
I do know a few. Yeah.
Yeah. Political violence isn't just Republican, Democrat. That's why I say left versus right.
Okay.
Those on the right are more routinely targets, and it's very blatant. People can say he was a registered Republican. That doesn't change the fact that it was an act of political violence carried out against Donald Trump, who's a conservative.
Yes.
Republican, whatever term you want to use.
Well, I guess, but if the argument is the left is violent, and I'm just thinking about this guy's, political background from the person. I hear what you're saying, that
Crowder admits that. Okay, yes, he does admit that. However, he's talking about a disproportionate. Let's not be like bad faith against Crowder either. He's obviously referring to like there being disproportionate attacks. He's saying that the left is disproportionately more violent against right-wing individuals. All she's measuring is like if he's willing to call one of his own also capable of political violence. She's measuring a bias. He's willing to call that guy out as somebody who's also actively engaged in political violence.
the right is targeted more often.
Yeah, we're the victims of political violence.
More often.
Right.
And
much more.
So would you classify that specific incident as violence of the right or of the left?
Of the left.
Well, the target is the right. The target was Donald Trump. So the net result is the same. We are often the targets of violence.
He's such a fucking retard. He's such a fucking retard. He's actually such a retard. Would you consider that a result from violence of the right or of the left? He would. The answer here is that the right is inflicting violence upon itself, which is true based on the standards that he set and based on what he agreed to. The right is committing violence upon itself. So you would have to label that right versus right violence. Funnily enough. He's so fucking tunnel visioned. He can't see past his own nose. He's so obsessed with the left being like inherently evil, with fucking liberals being inherently evil, that he wants that to also be a result of left-leaning political violence. He's taking it a little bit. He's taking a sidestep and going like, well, I didn't want to say that it was right versus right violence. I also don't want to say that it's left versus right violence, because that would be fundamentally incorrect. So let me just not answer the question and say the result is still the same. Right-leaning individuals are more likely to face political violence. Even though the question is, what was this particular example a fault of? A fault of the Democrats or a fault of the Republicans? The right answer would be a fault of the Republicans.
Yeah, but
including someone who may be a moderate Republican.
It's not the argument they're having right now. Crowder is arguing that the left is more violent than the right, but he moved the goalpost saying that the right is more targeted. Yes, he sidestepped it. Yes, I just talked about that.
Yeah, the left is still overwhelmingly violent, and I point to those polls that you can peruse from YouGov, from Reuters, not bastions of...
All right, we're skipping to the next debater because I feel like this one is,
We're skipping to the next debater because I'm not getting the answers that I want. Shut the fuck up, Nux Taku. It's so obvious. It's so obvious. Steven Crowder, at least 4 to 5 times, has countered Nux Taku's narratives that he promotes himself on stream. Of course, he's not going to keep engaging with this debate, because every single time that he comes up with an answer and tries to call her dumb, Steven Crowder just completely fucking rapes his talking point.